morning slash afternoon slash evening, we will be going over solving linear inequalities, the first of two videos for this week. Before we go, though, get started with that, feel free to pause the video and grab your book because the work we're going to do today is absolutely going to be based in the book. In fact, the next video will also be based in the book, so make sure you just have your book for pretty much any future video at this point. So if you forgot what inequalities are, there's a nice table on page 73 which tells you what each symbol means. Now for me, I like to think of inequalities that represents pretty much certain values being bigger than others or less than others as an alligator, where it will only eat the biggest value. It's like kind of like a mouth of that, or a crocodile. Crocodiles work too. So an example of this could be like this right here, which means x is less than 5. Notice how the mouth of the inequality is eating the 5, thus 5 is bigger than x, thus x is less than 5. It's this little alligator right there eating that 5. Now if I swap the sign around, instead of x being less than 5, now x is the bigger number, so x is greater than 5. This time the alligator is eating the x because it wants to eat the biggest value. Now, when we're going to solve with inequalities, they're very similar to equal signs. And in fact, there's only one time you really have to keep track of when with inequality if you do something. And that is the inequality symbol will swap directions if you multiply or divide by a negative. And we're going to see some examples of that in just a moment. So an example of this would be if we took our x is greater than 5, and instead of having a normal x, we had a -1 times x. Well, to solve for this, right, like usual, the opposite of multiplication is division, so I divide both sides by -1, and that will give us x is not greater than -5, but x is less than -5. Notice how the alligator swapped directions. So we got to keep that in mind because this whole thing got swapped because of these dividing by a negative. Or if I multiply by a negative, it would be the same thing. Now, let's go do some example problems, something a bit more difficult, okay? Let's say we have this inequality right here. 8c plus 10 is less than or equal to, the line underneath it means or equal to, which means we could include it, 50. So you would treat this like a normal equation for the most part. You would take a look at this, pretend that inequality is an equal sign, and think to yourself, how do I get c by itself? Well, the first thing I should do is get rid of that 10, right? So I'm going to subtract 10 on both sides to get rid of the plus 10. So I do minus 10. And that's going to cross it off because the whole goal is to get rid of the 10. It's going to cross it off right there. That's the whole point of that, right? Now, after that's crossed off, on the left side, all there is an 8c, so that drops down. Then we have less than or equal to 50 minus 10 is 40. Now, c is still not by itself, right? We have to get rid of that pesky 8. 8c stands for 8 times c. So the opposite of multiplication is division. I'm going to divide by 8 on both sides to get rid of the times 8 in front of c. So I divide by 8, and what's going to happen is that crosses off because the whole point is to get rid of the times 8, right? If anything else happens, I'm doing something else wrong. So on the left side, there's a normal c now. All the 8s are gone. But on the right side, 40 divided by 8 is 5. Now notice the sign never swapped the entire time because we didn't multiply or divide by a negative number. But, I think that problem is a bit too easy for you guys. Let's make it a little bit harder. How about this one right here? Ooh. So I actually want to show you guys a nice little shortcut to this because I think a lot of you are seeing right now why this could be scary. Because if you take a look at this, and I see a 2/5, and if you remember, if you have parentheses, you have to distribute that. I'm going to show you guys a shortcut to this. Instead of distributing by 2/5, instead of multiplying everything by 2 over 5, I can multiply by 5 over 2. And the whole reason for that is it gets rid of, what happens is when you multiply by 5 over 2 on both sides, if you take a look at the left side right here, the 2's will cancel out because there's one on top, one on the bottom. Remember we did the units crossing off? Well, that works with numbers too. The 2's cancel out, and so do the 5. So everything here is gone. And that's the best part about that. And so what's left of the parentheses, because our whole goal is to get rid of 2 over 5, what's left is negative 3x plus 2. Now what's on the right side, that still looks a little complicated. People don't like fractions. So let me review with you real quick, guys, multiplying with fractions. If I have 8 times 5 over 2, and this is normal 8, I'm just going to multiply the 5. 8 times 5 is 40, so that's 40 divided by 2. and that divided by 2 is 20. So this right side ends up being just a 20. So now I have negative 3x plus 2 is greater than 20. That's pretty good. So let's go ahead and do the next step. I need to get rid of that plus 2. What's the opposite of a plus 2? Subtracting 2 on both sides. So I subtract 2. And it's going to cancel out right there because the whole goal is to get rid of the plus 2. On the left side is a negative 3x. And on the right side is 20 minus 2. And that gives us an 18. So now we're doing pretty good so far. Everything's pretty similar to last time. So then our next step is to get rid of this negative 3. Well, remember, this doesn't mean 3 minus x or x minus 3. This means negative 3 times x. So the opposite of times negative 3 is to be divided by negative 3. And we have to keep in mind that's going to flip the sign, right? Because it's divided by a negative number. So divide both sides by negative 3. And that cancels out because the whole point of this is to get rid of the times negative 3 in front of the x. So on the left side, we have x. And on the right side, 18 divided by negative 3 is negative 6. So x is greater than negative 6. And you might think we're done here, but we're not, right? Because there's one last thing to do. You have to keep in mind that this flipped the inequality because we're divided by a negative number. So I'm just going to take the inequality and flip it. Our final answer is x is less than negative 6. Hopefully this helps you guys with solving inequalities. There's a few problems for you to do for practice. But overall, that's it for this lesson. There's one more video though, so make sure you watch that too. Otherwise, you have a good day. Bye.